Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. This is Matt Hardy. I'm the Program Director for Planning and Performance Management at AASHTO, and I want to welcome everybody to webinar number 42 of the joint FHWA AASHTO TAM webinar series. I know people are still logging in, so we have a few introductory slides here as people continue to dial in and log in. I do want to welcome everybody, and I want to say thank you to Steve Gay over at FHWA for continuing to have this partnership between us when it comes to the TAM webinar series, which has been going on for quite a while now. So we've been presenting these webinars about every 2 months, going back to 2012, on a wide variety of topics related to asset management. This is number 42, so you can only imagine the topics that we have covered. Today we've got one important announcement to get right off the top. And this is for all of you who are used to joining us on the second Wednesday of the month. For scheduling purposes, we had to switch to the third Wednesday of the month at the same 2 p.m. Eastern start time. So that's the one sort of major change, again, because of some scheduling difficulties that we had back in January. We're changing this to the third Wednesday of the month as opposed to the second Wednesday of the month. And we'll be sending out reminder emails and calendar appointments and all that good stuff to make sure everybody is aware of the change. And also, all this information is available on the TAM portal. You can see a screenshot of it there. You can go to www.tam-portal.com. So in our last webinar back in December, we took a look at the TAM consistency review process geared towards a lot of the state DOTs, and that's sort of process that FHWA is going through. We had a good long Q&A as part of the session, and if you missed it, you want more information about that, I would, again, encourage you to go to the AASHTO TAM portal, and you can find a recording of that webinar along with all of the information, all of the presentations, slide decks, all that good stuff as well. And in fact, you can find that for any of the webinars, any of the previous 42 webinars that we have hosted over the past 8 years, I guess. So again, you can go to tam-portal.com, click on TAM events in the main menu, and you can sort of navigate that way to find them. You can also register for upcoming webinars as they are announced, and we will be figuring out the remaining sort of calendar year 2020 webinars in the next few weeks or so. Again, you can find archives of previous webinars, and at the TAM portal in general, you can just find a lot of great resources on asset management, how to implement asset management, almost anything asset management related. We're trying to put it there so that people know about it, and it's not geared just towards the state DOTs, but any sort of transportation agency is our goal to use it as a resource for all things transportation asset management related. And later on today, we will also provide links to this recording as well as the slide deck. So I know people like to have copies of the slides and everything, and we'll be posting those momentarily to that portal. If you have any suggestions on future webinar topics, please let us know. We're always looking for good ideas. In fact, today's webinar on building information modeling actually came from some of the suggestions of previous webinar attendees. So again, love to have your feedback on that. If you have any questions for the presenters during today's webinar, please submit them using the Q&A functionality. Type in your question, and we will moderate those towards the end. And as always, we are looking forward to your questions. It's not the easiest way to do sort of an interactive webinar, but given the amount of attendees, we have about 150 people registered, but it's pretty much the only way that we can do it in terms of managing all the questions. And if we get a ton of questions and we can't have all the panelists respond to them, we will save those and send them to the panelists, and hopefully they will, they can get back in touch with you via email, and we have that information from when you registered. So again, thank you for joining us. Thanks to FHWA for this strong partnership. I think it's great. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Gay, who's going to welcome you and talk a little bit more from the perspective of FHWA. So Steve, all yours.
Thank you there, Matt. Federal Highway Administration, in cooperation with AASHTO, is very pleased to sponsor this Transportation Asset Management webinar series. We're We are particularly happy to see so many of you joining us for our 42nd webinar today. And we look forward to seeing you on many more webinars in the future. Today we're taking a look at Transportation Asset Management and BIM. And we have a special introduction overview prepared, so I'll keep my welcome brief. I believe the topic of today's webinar is especially important as we look to 2020 being an important year in advancing asset management one step further. We, Connie, you is going to speak in a moment, and I have had a good bit of discussion on this topic, which in fact led to presentation of this webinar. We agreed data and information is important for asset management as we analyze the data and make management decisions pertaining to our assets. We also agree that BIM is a valuable tool. We've had a lot of discussion on the application of BIM for asset management and how this project level information can be valuable for network level management. I'm looking forward to hearing from the presenters today of their activities and applications and those being considered in the future. I think you're going to enjoy today's presentations, and I hope we'll all learn a lot this afternoon. I'm certainly looking forward to it. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back to Jana Park of Spy Partners to share the agenda and objectives for today's webinar. Jana?
Thanks, Steve. Now, the purpose of the webinar series is to share lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge with the asset management community. For this webinar, the primary learning objectives are: first, building working knowledge of key concepts and definitions relevant to transportation asset management and building information modeling, or BIM. Beginning to apply this knowledge in the context of new TAM technologies in order to answer the following questions. What approaches are agencies taking to leverage BIM in their TAM processes? What benefits can my agency expect to better integrate BIM and similar technologies with existing TAM processes? What are the key lessons learned for agencies as they move forward with the application of the use of BIM in their TAM programs? And of course, to share lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge. For the agenda today, Connie Yu of Federal Highways will deliver our topic introduction. Next, we'll have Will Duke of Spy Partners present a project that's almost finished on the development of a guidebook for TAM data and information systems that we think will be of great interest to the TAM and BIM communities. Our first agency presentation will hear from Mike Kennerly of Iowa DOT. Mike's presentation is pre-recorded, so Matt Hobrook of Iowa DOT has joined us today to help take questions on Mike's behalf. Following Mike's video, we'll have a presentation from Utah DOT. Becky Helm, Kendall Draney, and Danny Page will be presenting today from UDOT. Karen Reamer and Bill Pratt of the Connecticut DOT will wrap up our presentations for this webinar. Just another reminder, please submit comments or questions using the Q&A feature of the webinar control panel at any time during today's presentation. And we will be posting the slides and video on the TAM portal as well. Now let's get started with our introductory presentation from Connie Yu of Federal Highways. Connie serves as team leader of for construction management in the Federal Highway Office of Infrastructure in Washington, D.C. In this position, Connie leads key national efforts to advance innovative construction technologies to help states build projects safer, faster, cheaper, and with a higher quality, such as advancing unmanned aerial systems, or UAS, and BIM for infrastructure. Connie is a licensed professional engineer in the state of Maryland. And now I'll hand it over to Connie.
Thank you. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you everyone for giving me this few minutes to provide an overview of BIM. In the next few minutes, I will be giving you some highlights of what is BIM. Okay. So I move on to the next slide, please. Yes. So I just wanted to give you a few minutes of some highlights. I don't have a lot of time, so I will be talking about what is BIM, why BIM, and then key takeaways on a global benchmarking study that we just recently conducted, and then finally an update on the development of a federal highway roadmap. Next slide, please. So if you were in a room, I would usually ask those of you who can tell me what is BIM, can you please raise your hand? But since we are not in a physical room, this is the slide that I have used since I came on board about 2.5 years ago in this position and took over this advancement of BIM and learning a lot about it. But the more I learn, the more information that I have questions about. In other words, BIM is all the things that you see listed here and more. So I'm kind of on a journey right now to try to find out exactly what is BIM that I can easily convey to management. And so BIM stands for Building Information Modeling. So keep in mind that the emphasis of BIM is about information. It's information. And then the building that you see, the definition, the building is actually a verb and not a noun. So it's actually building information, modeling. And so it's about all these things. But what is important to remember is all BIM is about, what I found out in the last 2.5 years. What BIM is all about is about making information available to anyone who needs it when they need it. So just imagine living in a world that you can have all the information that you need about your, assets when you need it. So how would life be when you have that information readily available? So just keep in mind that's what BIM is about. Okay. Next slide, please. So even though I did put a definition that I'm going to be using for federal highway purposes, the definition of BIM, there are some very important collaborative is an important word on this definition, and then managing the data, using the data throughout the asset lifecycle, and that's the important information to keep in mind what the BIM is about. And I also provided some examples of why BIM. This was taken out of a project from the Kew Garden project in New York, State. And so these were some of the benefits that they demonstrated on their project. So at the end of the day, BIM is about getting the data out of the 3D models that is being designed during the design stage. And the 3D modeling is just one piece of the whole BIM approach, the whole BIM process. So the 3D model today, you're not able to get it out, the information out right now to manage. And the asset management at the end of the day cannot access those data. So the idea is that, we want to make sure the data can be getting out of the system and into the system as well once you work on the asset itself. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the findings from another study that we have done on the global benchmarking study that we have done right now. If you can move to the next slide, I think that would be the next theme that I will be talking about there, because during the global benchmarking study, we visited like 3 cities in 5 days. So these were the cities that we visited. But one thing that stood out for me when I listened to one of the presentations in UK, it was offered by a federal agency there. They say that they have a project that collected over 500 megabytes of data, but they can only access 20% of the data. So in other words, they have a problem with that, and I don't think it's a problem unique to them. We do have that issue as well. So I think BIM is about also breaking down silos so that data collected throughout the life cycle, like during the planning, during surveying, during design, and during construction, can be handed off for asset management and operational purposes throughout the whole life cycle. So when we were there, the few things that, if you go to the next slide, that we captured the key takeaways, it was exactly what I told you at the beginning. So BIM is about better information management, and one of the countries that we visited is about, it's liberating data. It is about making sure that we are not locked into a data of a vendor that providing the software to them. It's about opening up the data so that everybody can access it when they need it. So and you already saw about the deduction in orders, delivery risk, as well as the cost. And so if you move to the next one, I want to quickly just touch on one other subject that we have been Federal Highway has been investing in, and this is the roadmap that this week we are actually having a meeting here in Arizona to kind of get some input on our BIM roadmap that you see in the red marking in the middle. And we have invested over $26 million to date since 8 years ago through either everyday counts effort, through 3D models, through e-construction initiatives. So we are now moving to the phase where we are trying to kind of put it to the next phase, which is to advance digital construction, in this case, management systems. So I think I don't have time for any more, so I think this is where we are. At the national level, we are trying to advance BIM, so I'm sure that Steve can, we continue to talk with the asset management community. And so we are now going to be maybe more to come as far as what we would like to see in the next 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, and how do we get there. So stay tuned, and hopefully we will have a chance to just talk again at a later webinar with this group. Okay? Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Connie, for taking the time from your conference and making this work. I just also want to tell everyone that if you go to the handouts part on your control panel, we've uploaded all of the presentations there. So if you want to have it with you as you're going through this webinar, it's available for you to download. All right, so for our next presentation, we'll hear from my colleague, Will Duke of SpyPond Partners. Will heads SpyPond's Richmond, Virginia office, where his work focuses on strengthening agencies' data and information management to support asset management. Topics he'll be addressing for us today. So take it away, Will.
All right, thank you, Yana, and thank you, Connie, for that introduction. So I'm here today to talk about this related research effort that I think spans both the TAM and BIM communities and would be of interest to all of those on the call here today. So what we're trying to do through the NCHRP 08115 effort is to develop a guidebook for data and information systems for TAM. This guidebook is intended to document the whole range of the data lifecycle, talking about how we can document, acquire, and manage data better, transform it into useful information, and then make informed transportation asset management decisions based on that information. So as you can see, obviously a big component of this is being able to collect and access and integrate information across the full life cycle of the asset. This guidebook will come in both print and digital formats, and it's going to provide a lot of different tools. It will provide self-assessment capabilities where a DOT can conduct a gap analysis and identify potential improvements, again, organized around the data lifecycle. They'll be able to evaluate those improvements and summarize them in a way that's going to allow them to prioritize these data and information system and TAM business process improvements in a way that's going to be really effectively presented in order to support implementation.
We'll also provide guidance around different organizational capabilities and tactics that are needed in order to really overcome some of those institutional hurdles that come with technological change. And so I think that's actually a big part of the challenge with BIM, is just the technical complexity leads to even more organizational challenge. So this guidebook spans 5 different areas, from beginning at data specification and standardization through collection, storage, integration, and access, and then ultimately into how it is analyzed and acted upon. But those first 3 areas are what I think are most pertinent to the BIM community. So that's where we're talking about how can we specify our asset information, our project information, our data out there, so that it can then be effectively collected at different stages in the life cycle and then integrated together all the way through to the operational and asset management decisions that need to be made out in the field. And so that's really what BIM is, of course, all about. So under specify and standardize as well as collect, what we're talking about are defining things like asset and project data models, where we're looking at defining an enterprise sort of asset breakdown structure so that you can really categorize your asset information in a way that can be exchanged between your different lifecycle systems. You're also talking about design model standards, things like how do you categorize and standardize your CAD information, or build into 3D, 4D, or 5D models that then can be effectively exchanged between your different systems. And then, of course, metadata and governance play a huge part in managing your standards. Under collection, when you're actually out there collecting, we provide tools to assess whether you're collecting the right information to the right extent, and whether there are tools out there like LiDAR or mobile field tools, which will help you do that in a more efficient or cost-effective manner. And then, define the business rules that ensure you're collecting that information to the level of quality needed for downstream business processes. And then lastly, and probably most importantly to BIM, under storage and integration, this is where we're looking at the full data lifecycle and the workflows. The full project lifecycle or asset lifecycle and data workflows between the different systems involved. Here we're talking about taking information from your asset management systems in order to effectively plan, and then pass that information on to design, construction, and maintenance activities. And then capturing that as work history out of your construction and maintenance files and updating the asset management system, creating sort of iterative improvement process where that information is always maintained and up to date and available to improve decision making. Now, this is very complex stuff, and so we've provided some tools to help with the process of completing these assessments. We have digital tools that will allow users to complete gap analysis and then prioritize improvements. We'll have case studies and other examples that will really support practical implementation, and then we'll address different organizational capabilities or practices that are needed in order to really effectively implement those targeted improvements and make sure that they stick and are producing the intended value for your business. So I only had 5 minutes here, so I kind of went very quickly through this, but I'd be very happy to take anyone's questions about this. This research should be completing here by May and available at that time.
All right, thanks, Will. We'll now hear by video from Mike Kennerly. Mike is the director of the Design Bureau at Iowa DOT. As we mentioned earlier, Mike was not able to join us live today, but he has agreed to pre-record his presentation, and Matt Hobrecht, the Transportation Asset Management Administrator at Iowa DOT, will be on hand to field any questions. Okay, let's cue the video.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Kennerly. I'm with the Iowa Department of Transportation. I am the Director of the Design Bureau, and I'm going to be talking to you today about BIM and asset management. I would like to start by apologizing for not being able to be there in person to present this as part of the webinar. Unfortunately, I am the chair of a committee that is a national committee that's meeting concurrently, and so we wanted to do this at least provide it to you by recording. The bio there is really there to scare little children and infants. You don't need to worry about too much in there. It's just for your information. The primary thing is the contact information at the bottom in case you have questions or would like to email me after the presentation. You know, one of the things that I think we all realize is that our universe is changing. You know, when I started with the Department of Transportation 36 years ago, survey looked a lot like it did on that image there on the left. And today, what you see is more consistent with the technology that exists out there in our field. You know, and I want to talk about the need for data integration, the connection between BIM and asset management, where our AASHTO committee is going on, the Joint Technical Committee on Electronic Engineering Standards that I chair, and then some of the national BIM efforts, just to give you a sense of where that's going. You know, one of the other aspects of our changing universe is if you look at construction technology today, one of the things that you're going to find is that most contractors have either migrated or they're beginning to migrate toward the use of automated machine guidance. Now, that's a huge step forward technologically for them, and it's a surprising step forward given our industry's past, but I've been really impressed with the way the contractors have embraced this technology, and to be quite honest with you, the contractors have in many ways been leaders in this technology in both its development and in its implementation, but they're gaining benefits from it from a cost standpoint, but also just from a production standpoint. It's making them more competitive, it's giving them cost advantages, and with the changing workforce, it's increasing their productivity. So I think that we're going to continue to see contractors utilize this technology, take better advantage of it, and really push state agencies to adopt this technology. You know, pavers are beginning to use it. You know, it's been prevalent with the grading industry, but we're now seeing a jump in the use of this by many of our pavers, noticing that they're going to stringless paving, which again has saved them time and money and made them more productive. And the nice thing about this, you know, at least from our experience, is that we've found that the results that pavers are getting in terms of smoothness, using stringless pavers has been just as good, if not in some cases better, than with conventional technology. So again, I think you're going to continue to see the contractors in our industry utilize these types of technologies more and more, and I think that just puts more importance on our ability to adopt that technology as well so that we can provide them with the information that they need. You know, this is pretty much what our plans look like, or at least our design effort looks like today. You know, the traditional paper plans and, you know, drafting tables have long given way to CAD machines, and the output from those CAD machines over the last, you know, 5-10 years has changed dramatically. You know, you're looking at, you know, bridges that are being designed with 3D technology, roadways that are being designed with 3D technology, and, you know, we're also starting to see other uses from this transition that I think are valuable as well. One of the things that we've done a lot of here in Iowa, and I know they've done in other states, is we're beginning to use animations and visualizations to help convey design intent. And you're going to see that increasing as well. You know, there's going to be more use of videos to help communicate what's going on to stakeholders, landowners, and other members of the design community. You know, we have created a number of animations to help with our public information meetings, with meetings with our management staff, just so that people can so that we can help people understand what it is we're trying to do. You know, I think anybody who sat down with landowners or stakeholders and trying to go through a traditional set of plans have at one point in time seen that glassy-eyed stare where it's clear they're struggling to see what's on that paper and to understand what we're trying to communicate. But when you can sit down with those same stakeholders and show them this type of visual, it's easy for them to understand what it is we're trying to do. It makes it easier to alleviate concerns, fears, you know, that they may have about the project's impact on their property or business, and it just makes it easier for all of us to do our business. But as that transformation continues, you're going to start to see, other uses of technology out there where you can, look at the use of iPads or mobile devices where we can convey or present design information in a much more handy way and in a way that we never could in the past. When you look at what we're doing with e-construction, I've already mentioned AMG, automated machine guidance, LiDAR, visualization, our 3D highway effort, 3D bridge, paperless business models, asset management, and another emerging technology, being UAVs and the data that's being collected with those, intelligent compaction information, but also the thing that's coming on that will be, I think, something that we're going to have to address in the not too distant future is the whole ideal of the data and information that we get from autonomous and connected vehicles. These new technologies produce obviously tons of information, and when you combine that with our legacy data, the stuff that you all have in boxes or bins or file cabinets stored in the basement or wherever, we end up with something that looks a little bit like this, where we have a lot of information, and the ideal is that it's all valuable, but unfortunately it's not connected in any way that really makes it accessible enterprise-wide. And so while we have a lot of information and we have been very good, as state transportation agencies at collecting data, the one thing that we haven't done as well as we would have liked to is connect that data. But that's the next step. How do we move from that to this, where you've got all of that data at your fingertips enterprise-wide to help you make decisions on asset management, to manage those resources throughout their life cycle. And so the ideal becomes, how do we get to this environment? And I think it really boils down to nothing more than data integration. And I think that's one of the biggest philosophical changes that we're going to have to make as transportation officials is the need to understand and adopt the fact that data may be our biggest asset and probably is our most important asset. But in order for us to get the benefits of that data, it has to be integrated, it has to be accessible seamlessly across multiple platforms throughout your agency in order for you to be able to get the information that you need to make the kind of decisions that you're going to have to make in an environment where we do not have all of the financial resources that we would like to manage our system. And so we have to make better decisions about where to invest, how to invest, and data integration, I think, is going to be one of the key components to our success moving forward. When you look at MAP 21, it talks about the importance of integration and analysis, to support program and planning. And that legislation was followed up by the FAST Act. And again, when you look at the language in the FAST Act, it also talks about data collection, integration, and the analysis to support program planning and performance management. All of those things are becoming key for state agencies. And as we look at this, the question becomes, as we talk about BIM, or building information models, how does that fit in to our ability to migrate toward a more data-centric effort, and how does that relate to asset management? Now, the one thing I think we all know and we've all seen over the years, if you've been involved in this, is that we get tons of data and information throughout the project development lifecycle. I mean, there's information that's developed and mined at the planning or the preliminary design phase. Additional information is added as you move to final design. We have the information that we get from contractors that, adds to that information. All of that then supposedly goes into, or hopefully, maybe it's a better way to put it, goes into your as-built. But then the thing that we need to move toward is being able to get that data that traditionally would end up in an as-built that's typically filed in somebody's basement or somebody's file cabinet, and get that information into an asset management warehouse. I mean, because that then makes it accessible, that then makes it something that agencies can use department-wide, but we've got to create that workflow that allows us to do that. One of the things that you see is that, there is all kinds of design data, construction data, as-built data, and that information then goes into, or at least the goal is for that information to go into a data warehouse. And then you want enterprise-wide data accessibility so that you can make decisions based on that, whether you're in planning, construction, design, whether you're in the district office, traffic and safety, or maintenance. And as we adopt this mindset of data as an asset, then as we add to and as we change those features and as they're updated or repaired or replaced, that information then goes back into the data warehouse, updates the original data, and then again can be used by the agency to make better decisions on where to invest and how to invest their limited resources. In terms of a BIM, all BIM stands for is a building information model, and it's been widely used in the vertical industry, and it's something that we are now migrating toward, in our industry. And you're really talking about moving from plans that have looked essentially like this image here on the left, for the last 40 years, 50 years, to a plan that starts to look like this, where the information is digital, where there's more data in there, and where it's easier for our contracting partners to consume as part of automated machine guidance. What you really hope for is you'll have a 3D model of what used to be a 2D representation for a plan, but you're moving to a 3D model that will allow you to assign data directly to the element. So if you were to take a look at a traditional 3D plan, and this one here represents a letdown structure, you'd be able to click on that letdown structure, and rather than having to have books and other resources, you'd be able to assign information directly to that element about the specifications, about design details, about standards, and then you could also add the tabulation, material certification, plan notes, information about the size, flow line, when it was installed. All of the information that would be handy and important and valuable as you look at managing that asset can be attached directly to the element, and that information can be updated as you move through the construction phase. So while it may have had a flow line of 106.2 during design, field conditions may have required you to change that to 106.3, and you can update that directly on the element so that that information is then available in a environment that can be harvested and put into your asset management warehouse. Now, in terms of where we're going with this nationally, like I said, I chair the AASHTO Joint Technical Committee on Electronic Engineering Standards. And as you see there on the left, we've got 17 state DOT represented consulting firms. We've got participation by Bentley, Autodesk, Trimble, the AGC. The idea was we wanted to bring a group together that could look at this from a number of different perspectives and to help us figure out how to move forward in such a way that we make sure that we are able to keep everybody on the same page, because all of us are going to be benefiting and contributing to this process. One of the things that we looked at as part of that committee was we wanted to conduct a survey to look at the industry needs, to see where state DOTs had issues making this migration, and to kind of develop a plan for how to help them move forward. We've been looking at, things that are, again, a big issue in the vertical industry, like a level of development specification, level of accuracy specification. We want to make, we made a recommendation for enhancing interoperability, and I think that may have been one of our biggest takeaways to date. Our committee made a proposal to adopt IFC, which is a international schema, that we wanted to adopt that for state agencies as a national model for state DOTs. Now, a lot of you may be familiar with the fact that we've got Trans XML and Land XML, and there are other schemas out there that people have been using over the years. But unfortunately, there is no single schema that has been adopted nationally that everybody uses, and that's essential if we're going to achieve interoperability, that ability to exchange information seamlessly across platforms. Right now we can do it on a limited basis, but there's the problem of data loss going from one application to another. And so if we can adopt a schema that everybody uses, we can eliminate that loss. We can enhance our ability to move information back and forth. And, we were pleased with the fact that both the AASHTO chief engineers and the AASHTO CEOs voted unanimously to accept that resolution and to move forward with the adoption of IFC. Now, as we look at that effort, I've already indicated that the Board of Directors passed that. One of the things that they asked us as part of that resolution was to form a cross-discipline team to look at how we would guide that effort and ensure that there was no duplication of effort, and to keep everybody in step, because as we look at this, it's important to recognize that data affects all of us, and all of us produce data. And so it's essential that as we look at how we're going to make that data transferable, that we look at all the other people that are going to be impacted by that, and that we work with them to ensure that when we're all said and done, what we've created is an environment where that data can transfer seamlessly. Now, we've had several meetings with IFC just to kick this effort off. They're actually going to be at our meeting, the one that I will be conducting at the same time as this, to take a look at how we can take another step forward. And we're going to continue that dialogue with them as we try to unfold how the U.S. can participate, how we can improve the IFC scheme, and how we can model it so it represents and is usable by our organizations, by our industry, and help us all move forward. And so there's a lot going on right now, and it's a very challenging time because of all the efforts and because of their diversity. But I think if we can all work together, and if we're all aware of what each other is doing, I think it's going to be important for us to make sure that we communicate, that we stay in touch, and that we share what we're doing so that we can get the most out of this, and quite frankly, get the most out of this as quickly as possible. And so I am hopeful that our committee and our efforts can facilitate that. I think this group is another part of that puzzle. And I think it's going to be essential that we continue to dialogue moving forward, that we continue to communicate moving forward, share where we're going, share successes, share failures, so that we can all achieve what essentially is our common goal. Now, I've talked about the fact that there are, numerous studies going on. It's amazing, folks, what's out there. But the key, like I said, is to pull all that together. I think that cross-discipline group that's going to be developed as part of the IFC effort will help with that. But, again, I think it's the webinars like this and the others that are going on, I think, are a key component of that effort as well. Now, obviously, I really can't take questions since I'm not there. But if you would like to, continue to dialogue, Matt Harbrecht from our agency will be participating in this webinar. You may be able to communicate with him, and you also, like I said, can contact me directly if you have additional questions. So again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. I apologize for not being there in person, but I hope this information has been helpful to you, and I look forward to further communications in the future. Thank you.
All right. So we're lucky to have Becky Helm, Kendall Draney, and Danny Page from the Utah DOT. Becky has been with the Utah DOT for nearly 8 years and as a part of their central pre-construction for 17 months. Her focus is advancing digital delivery. Becky has over 20 years of experience in GIS management, data analysis, project management, and IT development in government. Next up, Kendall has 7 years of experience working at UDOT. He's the asset manager for maintenance in the Asset Management, Maintenance, and Facilities Group, where he oversees the advancement of TAM. Lastly, Danny has been with Utah for 23 years, where he has served in numerous capacities as district engineer, as project manager, in bridge management and traffic operations, and alongside local governments. He currently serves as the Director of Maintenance, Asset, and Facilities Management. And now let's hear from Utah DOT.
Hello, my name is Becky Jelm, and I'm really happy to do this presentation today. If you want to advance the slide. Okay, so I'm going to give a pretty quick history of BIM in Utah. We really began working in this area about 6 years ago when we called it Intelligent Design and Construction. And when we began, our focus was really on supporting AMG. So reducing the need to recreate data and produce plan sheets, just passing a 3D model. That's how we began. I would say about 3 years ago, we switched to calling it model-based design and construction. And when we made that name change, we also shifted our focus again a little bit to really use the model as the legal document and begin advertising projects and doing projects without plan sheets at all. So we have 11 projects that we've advertised with the model as the legal document. 4 of them have had no sheets. We have 1 that is complete and a bridge project that's under construction and 2 projects beginning construction. So now where we are today is digital delivery, and that is really kind of a holistic approach, looking at how data can flow throughout our project delivery cycle from pre-construction to construction and beyond for use in asset management and planning. So we have an aid grant that we'll touch on later in this presentation that really focuses on digital delivery and how we're now building repeatable processes to create something that is sustainable and can support a digital twin in the future, which is a replica of our system. On this path, we've run into some pretty big challenges. I think the previous presentation touched on some, as did the presentation from Spy Pond. The biggest challenge that we have is really understanding and communicating how BIM applies to transportation in a practical way, and that is just a huge challenge. We work in it every day, and even wrapping our heads around it and how we can articulate it to our peers is difficult. Beyond that, we have two categories of challenges. The first is with technology integration. I think Mike Kennerly talked about that a lot, the need to integrate data from between different softwares and to be able to pass data from system to system and tool to tool. And there's a lot of work to be done there. And also updating our processes to support the change in moving from paper to digital and investing in data, recognizing that it is a huge asset and building the governance to support all of that. What we're doing here with our aid grant, we're working very closely with our vendors. We're a Bentley shop for CAD and we're an Esri shop for GIS, and these are just some of our key struggles. On the Bentley side, we just are dealing with a lot of unstable products. It seems that their products don't necessarily work with each other the way that they're designed to, and a lot of the capabilities that are in there are not. It's just not super stable. There's a continuously changing direction in their platform. So we were investing in Navigator, and they changed and are working in a whole new direction. We think it's a positive direction, but every change just adds extra complexity. It's difficult to integrate with. Those are the three key CAD issues. For GIS, it's just not a complete solution. It doesn't have the 3D visualization capabilities that we would like. So for visualization purposes, it doesn't really work. It also isn't able to break features the way we need to really help manage construction projects or quantities in the field. So those are some of the issues, but both vendors have been very supportive, and we're working closely with each of them. On the Bentley side, we're working on enhancements to Open Roads Designer, and we've built out our Bentley workspace to support the flow of data, and we're working pretty closely with them. The biggest challenge we have is, one of the big challenges is connecting services and bringing services into our design. Being able to access and use WFS services is pretty huge, and we had that in earlier versions. We don't have it today, so we are working with them to bring it back. Beta testing the iTwin design review tool was really good. We have really positive feedback on that, and we're making progress using Esri Collector. So our goals, are going to be to continue to partner with our vendors, but really we want to be agnostic. We want to develop processes that support use of any software, but deliver what we need to complete our projects. That is our end goal.
So with that, we kind of want to go over what we've been doing in the past 10 years with being able to build that basis of asset management and how that can be taken into the BIM world. And so we've been using a company called Manly to be able to do our mobile LiDAR for the last 10 years. They travel our 16,000 plus lane miles every 2 years and collect data for us on what those assets. We have about 26 different asset types that they collect. That is a range of barriers, signs, pavement marking, driveways, rumble strips, and each of those assets have different metadata that they're collecting for us to provide. With that, they are working to be able to give us higher quality data. Each year we go out with them. They're improving their collection. They're improving the way that they collect condition data. Right now, we've realized that there is some lack in the condition. Right now, it's more of a generalized way of saying condition data of either it's in good, fair, or poor, and it's more based off of a visual presence and not so much actual hard numbers. We're working with them to try to advance that area to be able to help us improve in pavement markings and signs, looking to be able to actually get retroreflectivity or a presence, so that it's not so much up to the person that's viewing the picture to give it a score, but actually have some data behind that. We're also working to do studies. So we've done various studies throughout the state with culverts. So we've been putting out with different consultants inside of our state, going and collecting data and determining the best way to look at our culverts, where our LiDAR data does not give us any data back on culverts, and looking on how we can do conditions and how frequently we should be going after that data. And then we also have our manual collection. So we've been having our maintenance stations, they all have phones and tablets going out with using the collector app from Esri, and they're going out and filling in the data that we're missing, that we don't get from that LiDAR and we're not getting from our studies, helping us fill in that base model of where all of our assets are currently at. And we still have a lot of work to do in that area. We're still going and collecting more information. It's not one and done and it's all there. Every year there's multiple things going on. And that's what's leading us into the next stage of using BIM. So our ultimate goal from an asset management perspective is kind of what you heard in the presentation before, is to be able to leverage the asset data that we currently have, pull them into the concept and planning phases, and then from that concept and planning, move it into the design, where the designer could then take what is out there, add new features, retire features that are there, and add new unique identifiers to them, so that the data can be then passed on to the construction phase. Inside the construction phase, we want our inspectors to be able to go in and fill in the metadata behind that item that's being installed. We're looking to be able to gather information such as what's the size, what's the install date, what was the sheeting type, all the information that we want to know what's happening to that asset, along with what our existing assets are there. So if you're tying on to something that's already existing, we know exactly where that tie-on happened, so that we can understand how to build our life cycle models to be able to know how is that asset going to degrade over time? When do we need to do the next treatment based off of what we just did from construction? Once all that construction data is there, it goes back to our asset management database. And that asset management database is then updated through maintenance processes. So as our maintenance crews go out and do things, they touch that database, put their work orders against it, and then have that get updated. We want this whole life cycle to go. That's what we're working towards. We don't have it completely worked out right now. We've got the maintenance side going pretty heavily with how it talks back and forth with our asset management system. But we're working there with our partners, as Becky talked about, with design and with construction, with passing that information back and forth and making sure that we have a consistent governance of what's the data that we need, how does that data need to be portrayed, so that we can pass it from system to system and get the valuable information out that asset management's looking for, to be able to do future cross-asset allocation and different things that we're trying to do in the asset area. So with that, I'll turn it over to Danny to kind of tell you the next steps of where we're going as a department.
Well, thanks everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about just 4 of the things that Utah's currently working on and what we hope as far as benefits to gain from each one of these. The first one is the machine learning partnering with automakers. It's not only automakers, but it's also other folks in the industry. And a couple things that we're looking at trying to do is just collect information currently that we are collecting, but in a different manner, and use it for a different process. And I'll give you an example. One thing that we're collecting information on quite heavily, and Kendall mentioned this before, was the striping and signing. But one thing that we're not able to collect is information such as near misses or lane departures. And we want to try to be proactive in using that information, that we can do things to address those situations where currently we're not collecting that information. The only type we get that information from is from our actual manly data collection, but we're not collecting information that has anything pertinent to what we can do to be proactive on near misses or lane departures. So that's something we're working on the auto industry with, along with some other groups, is to collect that type of information that still benefits us from a BIM perspective and an asset management, but also being proactive on the safety regards as well. The other thing that helps us do is real-time identification and notification of certain problem areas, and help us to identify trends that we may not be able to see just by collecting only asset data. So this kind of helps to complement all the information that we're currently collecting and look at things from a different perspective rather than just a condition only. So that's one thing we're working on as well. The next tool is a GIS evaluation tool. And we've actually seen this tool being demonstrated through other DOTs. And this is kind of our take on what we want to do. Right now, we've kind of identified a gap in our asset management collection process, and that's at the scoping / kickoff phase, if you will. One thing we're really good about doing is having a project directed by a particular asset like a pavement or bridge, but sometimes we fail to collect information on other assets and incorporate that into the project from day one. So what this GIS tool will actually be is it'll be a GIS tool that's in layers that actually displays the current condition of all of our assets. Now, when a project manager or designer goes in there, they'll be able to zoom in into a particular area, scroll in, and then all of a sudden they'll get dials and dashboards. And what those dials and dashboards will represent is current condition of particular assets within that area. And then if they can see a dial as far as good, fair, poor, and then they can continue to drill down. And so they know on their particular project what assets absolutely have to be addressed and why they need to be addressed, along with the decision tree table. And what we mean by that is based on that particular asset, when is that condition, or when is that time in the condition of that asset where you're going to want to do a particular treatment. And that helps us to make sure that we're investing our dollars not only at the right time, but also on the right treatment of that asset. And so that's one thing we're working on, is just a GIS tool that will be statewide, that will basically house the majority of our assets at this time, but also give us a real-time inventory and condition assessment of those assets, and be able to allow us to collectively pull that information in at scoping and at concept, so that when we go to advertise a project, there's no hidden, hey, by the way, I wanted to add this to the project, or I wanted to add this to the project at PS&E. We've already collectively have a very good idea of what all the assets are that need to be addressed with that project. So that's one thing we're currently trying to work on. The next thing is a Bentley asset insertion, and what that really talks about is the unique identifier. We talked about earlier about having every asset have a unique identifier that allows it to pass from cradle to grave. So you can track that particular deterioration and life cycle all the way through the lifespan of that asset. Now here in Utah, one thing that greatly affects our assets is the location. We have anywhere in St. George from 120 degrees all the way up into Randolph, where we have -40 degrees. Obviously, those temperatures, along with the condition data, are greatly affect the actual deterioration rates of our assets. And so one thing we want to try to do is get location-based condition data on those assets, so that way we know when to do the right treatments as well. And the only way we can do that is by having that unique identifier that allows it all the way from concept to design to construction and then back to maintenance. So that kind of closes the loop on that whole thing. The other thing it lets us do is actually track the unit cost of that actual asset, which we'll get into, and that's kind of a good transition into our new maintenance management system. So where we're currently at is we're in the procuring process of getting a new maintenance management system. And we have a lot of goals for this new maintenance management system, but one of the primary goals for us is to change the methodology of how we currently do our business, which in maintenance, it's all been activity-based. And one thing we're looking to change is go from an activity-based type of system to an actual asset-based system, where we can derive cost, we can actually see asset versus asset. And then the benefit of doing this is allows us to use our maintenance funds to actually put towards where we need to on the assets, rather than just look at it from a historical point of view from a funding standpoint. And the great thing for our maintenance guys is when they actually go out and do work, they can see how those dials are going to change. They can see the impact that they're having on the actual assets and the performance there of the assets. But I know I'm out of time. I just wanted to wrap that up real quick and tell everybody thank you. We appreciate the opportunity.
Here's our contact information. If you have more questions, please reach out to us. We are grateful for the opportunity to present. And again, thank you.
All right, this is Matt Hardy. Thanks, Utah. That was great. I know there are a couple questions for you that we'll ask you at the end. But let's get to our last presentation before we have the Q&A with Karen Reamer and Bill Pratt of Connecticut DOT joining us. Karen leads Connecticut DOT's recently formed Project Administration Unit, comprised of asset management, pavement management, cost estimating, and contract development. The asset management team is responsible for the development and implementation of Connecticut DOT's Transportation Asset Management Plan. Currently, her team is working to implement identification of assets, the FHWA TAMP work types, and associated costs throughout the phase of the capital projects. Bill is responsible for Connecticut DOT's BIM for infrastructure developments and direction. He leads the AEC applications team of engineers from the highway, bridge, traffic, survey, and GIS units. The team develops integrated applications and workflows to enhance capital project delivery and enterprise data integrations. Currently, he and his team are focused on implementing a cradle-to-grave project management system with BIM for infrastructure processes that transforms design data for integration with GIS systems that feed asset management and safety analysis. Okay, and take it away, Bill and Karen.
Thank you. Unfortunately, Karen isn't available today, but that's okay. She helped out with our presentation, and I want to thank the other states for what they did. I thought that was very interesting, and we're all kind of on the same page here. So I'll be touching on some of your points as well. So just kind of moving forward here, you know, a guy from a PhD from WSP, Jag Malala, was at TRB this year, and he has done some work with us in the past through FHWA, and he had presented some slides, and I took his slide and kind of swapped out some things that we're doing. And, you know, in BIM, as you heard from my bio, that's kind of what we do, and we've been really going at this pretty hard. I was fortunate enough to be on the NCHRP 1096 development of SIM. I was a project panel member on that. So for those who don't know, BIM is basically replacing SIM. Obviously, the original BIM was prior to that, but it's all kind of the same thing. And one of the main points that I took away from that experience was that, you know, every DOT is different. We all have different DNAs. And, you know, everything that we're showing here today is representation of our DOT and where we stand, where the weaknesses are and where the strengths are. So this is just where we're heading in Connecticut. And what I wanted to show you, you know, this is really a data transformation process map, okay, for project delivery and asset management. And really where this thing really is important is this middle section here, and that's with the GIS piece. I didn't hear a lot. I heard some GIS talked about, but I didn't hear a lot. And I really think, you know, GIS isn't just Esri. Obviously, you see a lot of Esri banners there, but GIS is information, geospatial information, okay? And what you're seeing here, and if you look at the legend in the upper right-hand corner, you're seeing the processes of these delivery of assets and delivery of capital projects are really driven by two processes. A CAD process in yellow down at the bottom, and that's really kind of the BIM path and the BIM process, with the design system at the lower left where there's your, I call them EED, or electronic engineering data. That's a directive we have issued, and that's, you know, the requirement of delivering those models at FDP. And there you see the model types of open roads and IFC. And then on the green process, that's more data driven, okay? And kind of starts here in our transactional database. This is where we put together, you know, a lot of asset information, the bridges, the traffic signals, the roads, okay? I didn't hear a lot about LRS today either, linear reference systems, okay, and road networks and HPMS and all that, and we're trying to integrate with that as well. So what we're kind of modeling here is the transactional databases, and we have many. We have one for engineering construction, we have one for planning, and we'll have one for public transportation. They're going to feed a data warehouse or a data mart, if you will. And we're going to pull data from that data warehouse into a product we call Atlas. And currently it's developed in open source, but we're moving it into Esri. But what we do there is we go ahead and locate our projects. okay, or even proposed projects. And from there, we could screen, we can do environmental screenings. We could look at all the assets that are in that area. Okay, we could develop those proposed projects. But at the same time, we could look at, you know, ADTs and functional class of those roads and the pavements. Okay, so we have the ability by just locating where a project's going to be is to quickly screen and quickly gather a whole bunch of information about that proposed project. So then as we move up the green line here and move over to the next phase of that, and that's our project management system, which is a new implementing SharePoint system. And what that SharePoint system does is it federates project data from legacy systems within our DOT, our financial system, our capital project, capital programming system. It also actually pulls in site manager information, so contractor payments and things like that. So there should be an arrow that's pointing from this system back into here as well. So what happens here is now our geospatial, or you know, our location information gets joined with a whole bunch of project data, and we manage the project that way. So now we can pass on information from that system of work that's programmed against assets, and then work that gets completed on assets. And you can see this is pointing down into some of our asset systems. Like we have InspecTech from Bentley for our bridges, sign supports, mast arms, and buildings. And we're able to develop different work types and work codes for those assets, and you're going to see a little bit of that later. But just, you know, we consider that passing that information BIM also. You know, it's what we did to those existing assets during that process. So, and again, down here, I'll go over what, you know, the design systems and how that kind of moves through. As someone said earlier, you know, those proprietary systems, you know, Open Roads and Autodesk are tough to pull stuff out of. We are using Open Roads, and we are using something called item types to develop rich feature models, especially for some of the roadside assets like signs and guide rail and those types of things. And we're looking at pulling out that data from those models through FME, and then pushing it over into our construction inspection applications and developing pay item reports from those. But the key here that we're looking at is we're trying not to have the inspectors have to attribute any of the assets. So we're trying to build those assets into our BIM model early on, and have everyone who touches that model benefit from that, especially the designers. So the ability for auto harvesting of a lot of those features to develop cost estimates and things like that is high on our list. So this is a similar model, but this is all pure GIS. So you know, we see delivery of obviously asset projects across the state, like safety jobs with a lot of different signing, guide rails, things that wouldn't require a CAD model. We see GIS processes really benefiting everyone, especially because we don't have to transform the data as much. You know, we wouldn't have to touch it as many times. It's kind of like working with firewood. The least amount of times you touch it is the better. As we move forward, you know, we've developed rules and what we're trying to do. These are just some quick screenshots of things of, you know, during our proposed project information, we want to identify assets and what work types and work codes we're going to be doing those assets. When we reach design approval, we want to verify that information. When we get the final design, again, more verification, and obviously in construction, more verifications. Some of the assets that we're working with today, the ones on the left have their own dedicated IDs, like bridges and signals and sign supports and buildings. These other ones I call these the roadway assets, and you know, those most most of those on the right are probably going to come from that CAD model. This is some of the things. This was some slides from Karen regarding, the financial plan for the TAMP, and the area in blue is kind of asset management programmed work. The area in gray is other work, and we have to do a better job understanding what investments we make in our assets in that other work in the gray area. This is just a screenshot of Atlas, which is showing construction projects within Connecticut, and they're thematically represented by the phase that they're in, whether in design, construction, things like that. This is a close-up of one of those projects, okay, and you could see the sections of road that are being affected. Again, there's our LRS being used as part of our project work area, and we're able to query out which sections of road are being fixed. In red is our traffic signals in those projects. And as we zoom in, you could see a little more. So we're doing quite a bit of pretty high definition GIS information during our project development. This slide is representing a project that had 4 different bridges on it. And you could see where we're going here, where we're trying to develop work types, okay? And within each work type, you see maintenance, preservation, rehabilitation. We're gonna have different work codes. We're trying to develop that for all of those major assets that we have, so we can do a better job with FHWA funding in those different asset management buckets. So I caught the bug of speaking pretty quickly, but that's our presentation for today. Thank you for having us.
Hey, Bill, thank you very much. And that concludes our presentations for today. Now it's time for an opportunity if people would like to ask some questions of our panelists. I have one that's for the Utah DOT team, and they asked about. Sorry, let me open up the questions here and let me read it. So the model that so they're from your presentation, the question is, the model the legal document, or are you able to apply, if so, are you able to apply the engineer seal to the model, or is a plan set, I'm assuming sort of a printed plan set, still needed for the engineering record? So anyways, can you talk a little bit about that? That's the question.
We use the model as the legal document, and we have a process for engineers to provide a seal along with that, and certify not only the model but some of the summary sheets, and then we provide a lot of information as for information
only. Okay. That was the one question that we had so far. I'll give people another minute if they have any questions for any of the presenters to sort of type them in. Oh, here's another one for Connecticut. What LRS is Connecticut DOT using? Says the BIM slide looked like it was Esri. So for you, Bill?
No, yeah, we're a Bentley XOR house, but I must say we are using. Let me step back a second. We just had a whole teardown of our Esri infrastructure and a rebuild. In the past 18 months, we've really worked hard and closely with IT and planning, and we're developing a whole new infrastructure. So there's a bunch of opportunities there for all of us, including engineering, asset management, and planning. But right now, planning's gonna hold on to the XOR solution to manage the road, okay? But it doesn't integrate well, and doesn't, is not too friendly with sharing that road information across other applications. And as you saw in my presentation, that big process map is really the data transformation and exchanging. That's what it's all about. So I think what's going to happen is we'll use XOR to do the heavy lifting of the road the road management as it moves and as things change. But we're probably going to use Esri to integrate and share that road network across all of our assets and all of our work. So that's the goal right now.
Great. Okay. Thanks for that, Bill. Another question came in for Utah. What information on assets is extracted from LiDAR, and how much effort is involved in extracting and integrating these data?
Okay, go ahead. So currently what we do is we get a point cloud from LiDAR data, and it's post-processed. And so we get everything from elevations to locations. I mean, everything you can possibly think of from our LiDAR GIS point cloud. If you want to add that, Kendall.
The biggest thing we get from all of those assets is we get their location, we get the type of asset that it is, and then they give us a rough condition, and that condition is based off of normally a visual inspection. It is not anything that's based off of your normal condition, like if you're doing an inspection. It's not quite into that detail, but it gives you a general idea of where that asset is on its life cycle.
We've also provided them with a cheat sheet so they can go through it, the post processors, and identify our assets based on certain types, so that way they can identify them a little easier through that process. For like guardrails, curb and gutters, different types of barriers, things of that nature where they may not be real familiar with it.
It takes about 6 months of post processing after they've run all of our roads for us to get the deliverable on that LiDAR data.
They're using, I just want to add in here, they're using the high resolution imagery with the LiDAR and a lot of input from us from the beginning forward. But if you're interested in seeing the actual data, you can get to it on UPlan, or you can go to data.udot.utah.gov and access those data layers and download them to see what comes with them, because it varies from asset to asset too.
Okay, great, thanks. And there's a follow-up question from Anne Marie about which assets. I think you addressed that. And if people want to learn more, again, go to the UPlan website, and they can probably play around with it to their heart's content and follow up with more questions if they have them. All right, I'll give everybody another minute or so, or a few seconds to sort of type in their questions if they have any. As people are, I don't see anybody typing or anything. So I think that's probably it for today. I do want to thank all of the panelists who took their time and effort to kind of prepare a presentation and participate in today's webinar. I know we're all busy and trying to do a lot more with less, it seems like. So thank you very much. I found this to be really useful and informative for me, and I'm sure many others did as well. The next webinar that we will have is 2 months from now, and it's on April 15th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And I guess that's a reminder about tax day as well, just FYI. We don't have the exact topics yet identified for those for the next 2 webinars, but we will have those sort of defined and sort of fleshed out in the next couple weeks. Again, please continue to send us ideas for webinars that you would like to see, any topics. If you'd like to participate in one, if you have something to share, we can try to sort of put together a good, a webinar. We would love to do that. So it's not just the actual topics, but sometimes it's actually having people who want to share something as well. And as a final reminder, if you need any more information, if you want to download, listen to the webinars, share them with your staff, the resources, all that good stuff, please go to the TAM portal. That's www.tam-portal.com. And with that, again, I want to say thank you to everybody. Have a good rest of the week, and we will talk with you later. Thanks, everybody.